Okay, I'm going to get started by just welcoming all of you guys. Welcome to Wat Tung. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. Today is what we call our Pali Canon and English study group, which I'll explain to you guys what this is later. We start with meditation, but then afterwards we study some teachings of the Buddha to be able to help you guys understand the path to enlightenment. Because the Buddha taught a path that will help you to train your mind to get to a point where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You can get to the point where you've completely eliminated all your discontent feelings. You no longer experience anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. You can eliminate all these feelings by training your mind. You don't need to walk around experiencing anger for the rest of your life. There's a solution. There's this better way of life that the Buddha taught. And part of that is meditation, but you would need much more than just meditation to be able to get to enlightenment. You wouldn't be able to meditate your way to enlightenment. One of the big myths about the life story of the Buddha is that he sat under a tree, he meditated, and instantly got to enlightenment. And this isn't actually true. It's through gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that you'll experience this. You'll notice that the Buddha didn't teach any rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer, or any of these kinds of things. He actually taught you to train your mind and cultivate wisdom. The things that you see nowadays where people are doing that kind of stuff, it doesn't actually come from the original teachings of the Buddha. These are things that people changed and modified and added into his teachings. So if you're interested in learning how to get to this enlightened mental state, I'll help you to be able to do that through all the various courses and classes and retreats that we have available for you. So today what we're going to do is start with meditation, and then we're going to move into studying the original words of the Buddha through the Pali Canon and English study group. So if you'd like to join for meditation, the way that I start this is with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. You guys are welcome to join in the chanting. It's important to keep in mind that chanting during the lifetime of the Buddha was used in order to remember the teachings, that every 2 weeks his students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. This helped them to commit the teachings to memory so they could actually practice them, because they didn't write things down during his lifetime because the technology didn't exist in that region of the world 2,500 years ago. So chanting was used solely as a learning tool, as a learning device. So today sometimes people think of it as prayer or worship, but it's not that. That's not how the Buddha actually used it. He used it just to help people remember his teachings. So if you'd like to chant along, I have chanting sheets over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself and get one. You'll even see the English translations on there too, so you can see what we're actually chanting, because we're going to be chanting in the Pali language. And if you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of this, I don't think the Buddha even created these chants, because a Buddha wouldn't walk around and say, here, chant these things to me out of respect for me, because this would be ego and arrogance. And the Buddha wouldn't do that. They would just see themselves as being equal to everybody else. They wouldn't see themselves as being above anybody else. So I suspect his students created these either during his life or after his death, because they would have had a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for him. If you learn from a teacher how to move to this enlightened mental state where the mind's completely peaceful and joyful, and this person didn't want anything from you or expect anything from you, you'd probably have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. So that's where I suspect that these chants actually came from, is his students. So you're welcome to chant along if you like. After the chanting, I'm going to then provide you some guidance in the meditation. It's almost like I'll be teaching you how to meditate while we're actually meditating together. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating. Everyone here and everyone online who's joining us will just all be meditating at the same time. Now, during that time of quietness, I'm sure there's going to be occasional sounds here or there, because you can't be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. You might hear a car going by, a dog barking, a bird chirping, someone might sneeze or cough here at the temple. This is all normal. If your mind craves permanence, then when you hear a sound during meditation, you will cause your mind to be frustrated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling. So all you need to do is understand that this is impermanence, that sounds will arise, they will change, and they will fade away. You can't be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. So you can understand that the world's just functioning the way it's intended to function with this impermanence. And as long as you don't crave permanence while you're living in an impermanent world, you can actually be quite peaceful when all these different things are occurring around you. So you'll hear occasional sounds, I'm sure, but you can just be at ease and just understand that that's normal and that these sounds are just going to arise, change, and fade away. And then after the period of time where we're meditating, we'll come out of that with some more chanting. And that's where I'll start today's class, helping you guys to understand some of the teachings of the Buddha through studying his actual words. So if you'd like to join for meditation, there's actually 4 positions that the Buddha taught: seated, lying, standing, and walking, because you'll need these different positions at different times. And most students are learning and starting out in the seated position. So I'll give you some guidance on the seated position, but there's these other positions that you would like to learn at some point because your body's not going to be able to be in the same position all the time. So I'll give you some guidance on the seated position. But just understand that this isn't like any kind of rules or anything like that, because everybody's body is a little bit different and different people are going to find things to be comfortable differently. So the things that I share with you are just things to consider, things to think about, and you can sit however you like. There's not just one fixed way to sit. You can sit however you're comfortable, but perhaps these suggestions might kind of help you to find something that's even more comfortable than what you're already sitting in. So if you're on the floor, people usually like to have some cushions under their rear. This will kind of soften your seat a little bit. And then if you're going to cross your legs, it's best if you do that lightly, whereas if they're real tight, it can impede the circulation and cause pain in the lower body. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets your hips up in the air and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, allowing the circulation to flow. And then the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could do that. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. There's other options here too. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or on their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you could really put your hands and arms wherever you like. And then in terms of anybody who might sit in a chair, or maybe if you're at home on a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair, you could sit however you like as well. Some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles, but you can see me sitting in a chair here with my legs crossed, so that's an option for you as well. And then in terms of your upper body, you would like this to be erect with your sternum up and your shoulders back. It'll help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, your mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be in the middle, where your mind can be attentive and alert, because meditation is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you would like the mind to be attentive and alert during this training. And not only does it help to keep your mind attentive and alert to have your sternum up and your shoulders back, but it'll make it easier for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to do some chanting to ease us into meditation. And if you guys would like to join along, you're more than welcome, because it actually helps you to get more benefit out of the meditation itself, because it helps to prepare the mind as you're easing into the meditation. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakewa Wat Tung Mahakewanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakewata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakwato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato สัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect. Just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Wat Tung Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here at the temple. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. As I was mentioning to you, today is our Pali Canon in English study group. What the Pali Canon is it's 45 volumes of books that are this large, and these are the largest, most complete collection of the teachings of the Buddha that we have. Based on what he taught during his lifetime, they started documenting his teachings shortly after his death because, as you guys heard me share, everything he taught during his life was taught orally. But shortly after his death, they started documenting his teachings, and we now refer to that as the Pali Canon, and that's the largest, most complete collection we have of his teachings, and it's in 45 large volumes of books like this. And what we've done in this book series that I share is it's been consolidated to a point where it has the teachings that you need to be able to make your way to enlightenment, and it's in a volume of series of 13 books. The first book is where I teach in all the various foundational programs. This is where students oftentimes start. It's called Developing a Life Practice, the Path That Leads to Enlightenment. You can actually get these for free, all the entire book series. You can go to our website and download it for free. You can take it and go print it yourself. You can get printed versions here at the temple by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can get it on Amazon if you have access to Amazon. So in all the various programs that I teach, I start with that particular book, and that is kind of like a traditional way of teaching where I'll come in and I'll be teaching for 15, 20, 30 minutes, opening up for questions, teaching for 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up for questions. And this is the way students will typically start learning in all all the foundational classes, building a nice framework to understand the teachings of the Buddha. Then, as students would like to explore more deeply what the Buddha actually taught, we have this program called the Pali Canon and English Study Group. It's where we study volumes 2 through 13 using the original words of the Buddha. And the way that I do this is I invite students either here or in Zoom to be able to read a chapter using the original words of the Buddha. This is the chapter, the first one. It's just 2 sentences actually, or 3 sentences here. And after a student reads this chapter, then I'll share some teachings on it. Then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to that particular teaching. This is volume 11, chapter 121. And what you have here is you have the words of the Buddha. You have a reference that takes you back to the original source teachings in the Pali Canon. And then you've got some words from me that are helping you to be able to understand how to integrate this into your day-to-day life, because it's helpful to have a dedicated practitioner and teacher to guide you on the path to enlightenment, because you wouldn't be able to experience enlightenment on your own. You're going to need guidance from someone. So these are the original words of the Buddha, something that he taught. And what we'll do is read this, have someone read it, and then I'll share some teachings on it to help you more fully understand it. If you'd like to volunteer to read, we have microphones here at the temple. Just come get a microphone, take it back to your seat. All you need to do is press the gray button. You're going to see the lights come on, and you hold that up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then you can keep the microphones with you, because you might have a question or you'd like to share your microphone with somebody around you. You can just keep it with you. And then if you're not using it, if you could turn it off, that way we won't get the feedback from the speakers. And then for anybody who's online, if you're in Zoom and you would like to volunteer to read, you can just electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and then we'll be able to hear you all throughout the temple and throughout the live stream as well. And then if you would like to ask questions here at the temple, again, if you guys could use the microphones, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom, you can put your questions into the comment section. I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask your questions that way. So I'll show you guys how this works. Is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this particular chapter? Yeah, Kylo.
Nibbana, the destruction of the taints. Venerable Sir, it is said, the removal of craving, the removal of anger, the removal of ignorance, and knowing of true reality. Of what now, Venerable Sir, is this the designation? This, monks, is a designation for the element of Nibbana, enlightenment, the removal of craving, the removal of anger, the removal of ignorance, and knowing of true reality. The destruction of the taints is spoken of in that way.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here, the Buddha is referring to something called craving, anger, and ignorance. This is called the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. These are 3 high-level descriptions of the pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the unenlightened mind. And this is what causes the mind to stay in the unenlightened state, where it experiences anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these feelings are being caused by these 3 things. At the deepest level detail, the Buddha describes something called the 10 fetters. These are called pollutions or taints or defilements. And that's all the teachings of the Buddha are guiding you to eliminate those 10 fetters. But when we talk about it from a high level, it's referred to as craving, anger, and ignorance, because this is a way that you can refer to it in a very easy and quick way that people will understand. What craving is where the mind is longing, yearning, and chasing after the objects of its affection, wanting things to be a certain way, having expectations and wants. This is the mind longing, yearning, thinking the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. It's like an unquenchable thirst that the mind has, and it longs and yearns, and it craves permanence, wanting things to be permanent. And if the mind gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings, like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if the unenlightened mind doesn't get what it wants, then it experiences painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. This is the unenlightened mind causing its own discontent feelings, that oftentimes people think it's something external that's causing you to be angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed or any of these other discontent feelings. But it's actually what's going on in your own mind that's causing these feelings. It's the craving, the longing, the yearning, the wanting, the expecting things. If you think back to when we were kids, if we asked our parents for chocolate and ice cream and they gave it to us, oh, we were so happy, right? Oh man, that was such good ice cream. Oh my goodness, I feel so great. I got chocolate and ice cream today, right? But then if we asked our parents for ice cream and they said no, we were angry or frustrated, right? Or some other thing, right? Like, I don't know, just say you want more money at work. If your boss gives you that money, oh, you feel so happy and excited. But if you don't get a raise, you're feeling frustrated or agitated or annoyed because the mind's not getting what it wants. It's not your boss causing these feelings. It's not mom and dad that's causing these feelings. It's your own mind. That's what the craving, desire, longing, yearning is, the wants and expectations in the mind. And the mind can only be happy if it gets what it wants. This is called conditional happiness. So basically, if my mom and dad do this, if my boss does this, if the weather is this, if my bank account is this, if I have this kind of house, this kind of car, if my friends do this, then I will be happy, right? So your happiness actually shrinks as long as you have this craving, this desire, this longing, this yearning, this wanting things to be a certain way in your mind. But if your mind's not chasing things, then in the unenlightened state, what it tends to do is it tends to swing to the other side where it's dull and lethargic and lazy, right? It's complacent. And that's not where enlightenment is either. You won't experience enlightenment there. The Buddha is inviting you to come to the middle way where you can pursue your goals, objectives, and interests through wise decision making. And that's where you can actually experience enlightenment, through this middle way of pursuing things as a goal, objective, or interest. So as the mind is craving, it can only be happy when it gets what it wants. So the happiness shrinks. This is why some people are old and grumpy, right? You don't have to be old and grumpy, but some people are, because they have all these expectations in their mind of what they want people to do around them. And if the people don't do those things, they're going to be angry and frustrated. But when you get rid of all of that, your mind can be peaceful and joyful all the time. If it's raining outside or if it's sunny outside, you can be peaceful. But if you can only be happy when it's sunny outside, the sun is not permanent. So that means you can't be permanently happy. If you can only be happy when your bank account balance is up here, you can't be permanently happy, because when it goes down here, you'll be sad or frustrated. So the Buddha is teaching you how to remove or eliminate this craving, desire, this longing, yearning, wanting things to be a certain way, and you can only be happy when you get it that way. Because when your mind's doing that and the anger is arising, this is where the mind becomes unskillful and it tends to push people away, or you might push a situation away. You might have noticed that in your life, that when you were experiencing painful feelings, you thought it was coming from something external, and you pushed away family or friends out of your life, and you decided that you no longer wanted to associate with them. This is the mind thinking that the problem is external, and if you push people away, that's going to make things better for you. But it doesn't, because you see, you still get annoyed, you still get frustrated, you still get agitated. You haven't solved your problem, because that person isn't the problem. And you can see that when you push them out of your life, it didn't solve your problem. The problem is the anger and the frustration and all those other discontent feelings in the mind. If the mind's not pushing things away, this is called aversion. It will typically be bitter and harsh and hostile. When you experience the anger arising, you'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile to people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And this is damaging your relationships with people. You can't live harmoniously with all people. It's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another being, trying to get that being to do things your way. The mind's trying to get its cravings fulfilled, and it thinks that if it's bitter, harsh, and hostile, that it'll fear this person into doing things your way. Or the third thing you'll do when this anger is arising and you don't realize it's coming from craving is you might put your expectations on people and try to control people and pressure them to do things your way. Again, this is the mind trying to get its cravings fulfilled. And this is all coming from the mind's lack of wisdom, this unknowing of true reality, This is the mind just not understanding what the true problem is and the true cause of that problem. That the mind firmly believes in the unenlightened state that it's other people that are causing you to be angry. It firmly believes that because of its lack of wisdom. It's confusion, it's misunderstanding. This word ignorance is one that a lot of people use because we're translating the words of the Buddha into English, but the word ignorance is like a derogatory word, it's a degrading word, and a Buddha, an enlightened being, is not going to refer to someone in a degrading, diminishing way. So that's why I inserted here a knowing of true reality, because that's a better way to think of this. It's like confusion, misunderstanding, lack of wisdom, that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. So because of these cravings, where the mind's longing, yearning for things to be a certain way, and it can only be happy when it gets things that way, then the mind experiences anger. And then when this anger is arising, you're damaging your relationships. And then where all this is coming from is the ignorance and the lack of wisdom, this unknowing of true reality. And the mind stays stuck in this cycle over and over and over again of keep experiencing this over and over and over again. So while we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, it's actually because of ignorance that craving and anger continues to exist. And that's why all the teachings of the Buddha are all about you cultivating wisdom. There's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha. You're not believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. You're actually learning, growing, and developing in this life to cultivate wisdom. You're learning and examining the teachings, which is what we're doing now, helping you to intellectually understand the teachings. Then you would like to reflect on the teachings to independently verify whether they're true or false. That's why I'm giving you examples so you can reflect and see in your own life that yes, this is indeed what you're experiencing, but then you need to practice the teachings, integrating the teachings into your day-to-day life and transform the mind through the practice of the teachings. And that's where you'll see real results. So the teachings of the Buddha are about getting to an ideal life now, in this life. It's not about something that's going to happen after this. It's about getting to a wonderful life now and experiencing the peace and joy now. And what this student is asking the Buddha, that's what this is. There's a student asking the Buddha a question about the removal of craving, anger, and ignorance. They're saying, well, what is this? If we remove craving, anger, and ignorance, what does that mean? Like, what is that supposed to do? And the Buddha is saying, well, that's where you experience enlightenment. That's what the word nibbana means. It means enlightenment. So the removal of craving, anger, and ignorance is what would produce enlightenment. And they're referred to as the taints or the pollutions of the mind, the defilements. As I mentioned, the deepest level of detail is called the fetters. What a fetter is it's like a shackle and a chain and a ball that is around the ankle. During the lifetime of the Buddha, this is how they kept prisoners in a certain area, is they would put a shackle, a chain, and a ball around your ankle, and now they would keep you in a field. Where today we put prisoners in jail cells or prison cells. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. So the Buddha figured out what are these 10 pollutions in the mind, and he figured out the tools and the techniques of how to eliminate them. And then once you do, you experience the peace and joy. It's gradual, that you'll gradually see this peace and joy coming into your mind more and more. You'll see more harmonious relationships, being able to navigate the world more peacefully. And it's through the removal of these pollutions that this is occurring. So when we talk about these pollutions at a high level, we refer to them as the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires of craving, anger, and ignorance, because all of the 10 fetters bubble up into these 3 categories of craving, anger, and ignorance. So there are certain solutions to these. This here is just the Buddha explaining that eliminating craving, anger, and ignorance is what produces enlightenment. But then in all of his other teachings, he's explaining to you how to remove this out of the mind. So you can actually learn these tools and techniques of how to uproot these out of your mind. In fact, the meditation that we just did this morning is helping you to do some of this, but there's a lot of other teachings that you would need besides just meditation. You wouldn't be able to meditate your way to enlightenment. So do you guys have any questions on this chapter or anything that I just shared about what this chapter is? Yeah, Alicia? For those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
I have a question about what you said about if we put people on the side or a situation on the side after experiencing discontentment. sometimes when I'm going through this kind of situation, I feel like my energy is drained for the emotions or for the talk or whatever the situation is. So I need to isolate myself to recharge from that and to be able to reflect. And in some way, it's also putting people or the situation on the side. So I feel like it's putting some boundaries to be able to recharge. But like, what would be like the right way to think through that?
Yeah, I never think in terms of right and wrong, because this assumes that there's only one right way to do things and everything else is wrong. And of course, with the ego in the mind, my way is the right way and everyone else's is the wrong way. That's what the ego is going to think. So I think about it as wise and unwise. There's no harm in choosing to step away from a relationship or step away from a situation. There's no harm in doing that. In fact, that can be wise in some situations. But what I was describing by pushing away, this is called aversion. What aversion is where the mind thinks that the problem that you're experiencing, like your anger and frustration or that emotional draining that you experience, the mind thinks that that is external. And the mind thinks that by pushing this person away or this situation away, that solves the problem. But it doesn't solve the problem, because that's not the actual true cause of the problem. So stepping away from a situation or stepping away from a relationship can be helpful in various situations, but you need to maintain what's called right view, where you maintain your understanding that the difficulties and struggles that you're experiencing within your mind is being caused by the mind itself. It's not being caused by this person. So choosing to step away from a situation isn't going to solve the problem. You still need to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment. But if you step away from a situation and maintain right view, that can actually be part of the solution, because your mind has to let go of whatever it's holding on to that's causing the discontentedness. There's some craving or some clinging that the mind is having that's causing it to be discontent. So stepping away from the situation or stepping away from a relationship can be part of the solution, but you need to maintain right view, where you understand that it's your own craving, desire, attachment that's causing those difficulties and struggles within your mind. What aversion would be is to be pushing this person or situation away, thinking that you've solved the problem, because the mind thinks that this person is the problem. And now if I push them out of my life, now I've solved it, where that keeps the mind in the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. So that emotional draining that you experience, that's from your mind's craving, desire, attachment. It's not from this other person. And sometimes people talk about these things like boundaries, like you mentioned. That isn't something that's going to lead to your peace or your joy, because what people are typically doing when they're talking about boundaries is they're going around teaching other people how they want them to interact with you. So someone might say, this is my boundary, right? And now here I'm going to erect this boundary, and now I'm going to teach you how I want you to interact with me. And when you don't do it my way, you've crossed my boundary. This is just creating an expectation in your mind. This is a want. This is a craving. And now the mind wants to go around the world and teach everybody how to do things my way. And now when you don't do it my way, now you've crossed my boundary. And now an individual might feel justified in their anger, their frustration. But that's just another word for a craving, desire, attachment. So what you would like to do is get to the point where you understand wise decision making, and then you make wise decisions about how you would like to navigate the world. So for example, if somebody touched you in a way that you felt like is not the way you would like this person to touch you, instead of setting a boundary and saying, all right, ma'am, or all right, sir, I don't expect you to be touching me this way, and you shouldn't touch me this way, and you've got to stop doing this or I'm going to get angry and frustrated. Instead of that, you can just realize, this person thinks that it's appropriate to touch me that way. I'm going to step away from this situation. And now you can maintain your peace and maintain your joy and just realize that, hey, I'm going to step away from this situation. But if you're experiencing frustration or agitation that someone has touched you a certain way, that's the craving, desire, attachment that's in the mind. And even in that situation, you still might choose to step away, but you need to realize like, I have an expectation that people will touch me a certain way or not touch me in certain ways. So you don't need to create a boundary and tell everybody the way you want want them to interact with you verbally or otherwise, you can just make wise decisions of how to navigate the world and who to involve in your life, but then maintain your peace and joy, because people aren't going to do things your way. That's normal, right? That's impermanence, that you have a certain way that you think that you would like to interact with the world, but not everyone's going to interact with you in that way. And that's just impermanence. And now you just decide when people are interacting with you, who it is that you would like to spend time with and how you would like to spend your time. And if someone does things that you feel are like wildly unwise and you're not interested in being around that kind of thing, that's where you can just choose to step away from the relationship, but still maintain right view that if there's any discontentedness, it's coming from your own mind, and just stepping away from the relationship isn't going to solve that. You need to be able to get rid of the craving, desire, attachment in the mind that's causing that discontentedness. Alejandro?
I have a question about if you can give me any kind of advice to remove attachment for students, because I'm a mentor, and this week, for example, happened something like I'm working with someone in marketing, and he asked me to ask all my students for testimonials. So we can
ask your students for what?
Testimonials.
Okay.
And one of the persons that I have more affinity, I asked for the video and things like that, and he said, well, I will do it, but later realized, it has to be video, so he told me I'm not interested to do it. And I asked why, or well, mainly if it's something that, and he was very rude, like, he said that he didn't want to do it, and very seriously. So yeah, I think that because I have a little bit of attachment, I take it a bit personally. So, yeah. But also I don't know sometimes how to put the difference between teaching the student and also not having attachment is difficult for me. So, if you have any advice about that?
Yeah, in that situation, you definitely had an expectation, a want for the student to do the video, because when they said they weren't going to do it, you said why, right? Because you were trying to figure out how to get this person to do the video for you. That's what you wanted. You wanted this video, right? So if I were you in that situation where the student said, no, I'm not going to do the video, I would have just said, thank you so much for considering it. I appreciate that you even thought about potentially doing it. Thank you for that consideration. And then just move on, because whatever they said, whatever their decision is, that's their decision. You never would like to be in a situation where you're trying to change their decision or coerce their decision to be what you want, right? Because you had a certain want, you wanted this video, you're trying to convince this person to do it your way, where this person had already made a decision for themselves. They decided they weren't interested in doing it, and then you just accept that. That's what you would like to do. But what we tend to do in like family units, like with mom and dad and brothers and sisters, when mom says something, an individual like the kids or the husband or the wife or whoever will try to convince that person to change their mind, where you need to just accept whatever they say. So like 2 years ago or so, my wife came to me and she said, hey, I need to go to America and I need to work. I need to make some more money. And I said, okay. How long are you planning to go for? She's like, 2 months. And I said, okay. When are you planning to leave? She said, probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I said, okay, well, have a good time. If there's anything you need from us, just let us know and we'll take care of those things. Now, I like it when my wife's here in Chiang Mai. I enjoy having her at home, but I don't want it. I don't expect it. I don't long and yearn for it, because I realize she's impermanent, and sometimes she's going to be here and sometimes she's not. So when she said that she would be planning to go to the US, I just accepted what she said, right? Like I didn't try to convince her otherwise, because that was a decision that she made for the reasons that she had. Now, asking, like I could have asked her, like, why is it that you need to go to America? But I already knew, but I might have asked her, I can't remember. I knew she needed to make more money, that she wasn't able to really make enough money here in Chiang Mai to support the things that she needed. So when someone makes a decision, your role is to just accept it. whatever they say, and then you make decisions accordingly. If you needed videos and this person can't provide it for you, then you just ask somebody else and you just accept their decision. So you need to get used to people telling you no, and they're not going to do what it is that you're asking. And now when you get used to that, you can just accept whatever anybody says. The way that you eliminate attachment to individuals or to people that you notice that you're having an attachment to an individual is you do contemplation of death, where you sit, you close your eyes, you imagine this person has died in your own mind. Maybe a doctor, a nurse, or a police officer has informed you, maybe a family member has informed you that this person has died, and now you play that out in your mind for 10 or 15 minutes, and you might even grieve that this person has died. You can essentially convince your mind of this. But eventually, if you do that enough times, multiple sessions, your mind will eventually let go and it won't have craving, desire, attachment. But I suspect that your craving, desire, attachment in this situation wasn't to the person. It was probably to the video or to the marketing that you were doing or to the money that you could potentially make or looking so great in front of your other students, or maybe you had a craving for every student to do things your way. These are the types of cravings that I can potentially see there. But a teacher, we can only kind of guide you of where to look. That's where your mindfulness comes in. You need to look within your own mind to figure out what were your attachments. And it might have been more than one. And you got to figure out what those attachments were and train your mind to let that go and understand that not everyone's going to do things your way. And whenever you ask something of someone, if they're not able to do it, you just be completely comfortable with that and just accept their decision. And then I even like to thank people for even considering, because every once in a while I need to ask people for help too. And then sometimes they say yes and sometimes they say no. And even when they say no, I say, thank you for even considering it. I really appreciate that. Right? Because not everyone's going to be able to do the things that you ask. And if you go in with the understanding that this person's going to potentially say no, and you prepare your mind for that, then when they say no, you can just be at ease and just understand that's impermanence and not everybody's going to say yes to you. And that's okay. And that'll help you. And each one of these situations is going to help your mind to be able to let go. And of course, as you know, you're going to need the Eightfold Path to be able to train your mind to let go. So you practice breathing mindfulness meditation, generosity, and all these things. That's also training your mind to let go. So your mind can mature and mature and mature and ultimately be comfortable to release these attachments and these clinging and craving that your mind has. And that's just going to be a gradual process of doing that.
Question related with that, because I know that I can have my cravings in that situation, but also I know as a mentor, because I teach them how to do personal branding and things like that, that probably there is a fear in the other person also, like to appear publicly or doing videos or things like that. And I can give feedback, but I don't know if it's the right moment or I had to wait another moment to give some advice. Even
say all that again. I didn't quite understand.
The thing, normally I teach my students to do personal branding and promote things that can help to have more visibility. And sometimes they don't do it because they have their own fears, something like that. So sometimes I give them advice because they are beliefs that they have. So in that case, I know that it can be my craving, but also I know that because I know the person, I know that there is certain background and I can give advice, but I don't know if it's the right moment or because I'm mixing two things, but I know that here is, probably my expectation, but probably the other person, like as a mentor, I can help them to improve certain things.
Yeah, you would be wise to separate those two things. If you're asking them to create a video for you, for your own marketing, and this is something you're requesting of them, that wouldn't be the time to then start giving them feedback about their development of their career and stuff, because now the way it's appearing is that you're wanting something and now you're trying to put expectations on them of how to do this thing for you, where you need to separate these two conversations, quite far, at least a week away from each other. Whereas if you're teaching them about branding and marketing and stuff like this, teach them about that stuff. And if they need to do videos, great, have them do videos for the branding and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean it has to be for you and about your services, because your students that are paying you a fee for their for what you're teaching them, they're not responsible to help you with your marketing. That's something that they would do out of their own generosity. And so what you're doing in this situation is you're requesting generosity from them. Oftentimes a better way to do this kind of thing is to do it as a general statement. Like, I don't know if you have this, but like, say you had a Facebook group with all your students in it. And if you made a post that says, hey guys and girls, I'm doing some testimonial videos with a marketer. If there's anybody who would be willing to create a video for me that would help me with marketing, I would really appreciate your kindness and generosity. Where if you ask a specific person, like, hey, can you do this for me? Sometimes that person feels like they're being put on the spot, and you're going to get a yes or no from that person. Whereas if you ask a more general, broad to a broad audience, then it allows the people who are interested to help you to step up, rather than kind of like putting someone on the spot and saying, will you practice generosity with me today? That's like an ask, where what the Buddha teaches you to do is await what is given. So if you have like a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group or something like this, you can just put out a message and then let people step up to the opportunity that you're providing them. This is a better way to approach that kind of thing. And then the person, if they say no, sometimes they experience guilt and shame and frustration because of their craving, perhaps. So if you do it this way, it helps to keep things more clean for you. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so let's go to this next one, because I don't see any other questions anywhere. Is there someone who would like to read this next one, chapter 122? You got it, Rachel? Okay.
The destruction of craving is nibbana, enlightenment. Venerable Sir, it is said, a being. In what way, Venerable Sir, is one called a being? One is stuck, Radha, tightly stuck in desire, longing, excitement, and craving for form. Therefore, one is called a being. One is stuck, tightly stuck in desire, longing, excitement, and craving for feelings. Therefore, one is called a being. One is stuck, tightly stuck in desire, longing, excitement, and craving for perceptions. Therefore, one is called a being. One is stuck, tightly stuck in desire, longing, excitement, and craving for volitional formations, choices, decisions. Therefore, one is called a being. One is stuck, tightly stuck in desire, longing, excitement, craving for consciousness. Therefore, one is called a being. Suppose, Radha, some little boys or girls are playing with sandcastles. So long as they are not free of desire, longing, excitement, thirst, passion, and craving for those sandcastles, they cherish them, play with them, treasure them, and treat them possessively. But when those little boys or girls lose their desire, longing, excitement, thirst, passion, and craving for those sandcastles, then they scatter them with their hands and feet, demolish them, shatter them, and put them out of play. So too, Radha, scatter form, demolish it, shatter it, put it out of play, practice for the destruction of craving, scatter feeling, scatter perception, scatter volitional formations, scatter consciousness, demolish it, shatter it, put it out of play, practice for the destruction of craving. For the destruction of craving, Radha, is nibbana.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. All right. So let me explain to you what the Buddha is describing here. He's talking about something that we refer to as the 5 aggregates. We might talk about this as 5 criteria or 5 elements that determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. This is the form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. You need to know what is a living being in order to develop your practice on the path to enlightenment. Because any time that you cause harm to a living being, that harm is going to come back to you. So the Buddha gives you a definition of how to determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. Because again, if you cause harm, then harm's going to come back to you. You can't cause someone else to be discontent. You can't cause someone else to be angry or sad or frustrated or any of these other feelings. Even if people are blaming you for doing that, that's their unknowing of true reality. That's their ignorance. I'm sure you've blamed other people for causing you feelings, and there's probably people blaming you for you causing their feelings. That's not true reality. That's part of the lack of wisdom that the mind has. But you can cause someone harm. Causing someone harm is to cause harm to their physical body, to their material possessions, to their reputation. Whenever you cause harm to another being, harm is going to come back to you. This is a harmful decision. This is the natural law of Gotama, of cause and effect, that whenever you cause harm, harm will come back to you. So for example, right now you're just sitting here listening to someone talk. You're not causing any harm to anybody. That's why no harm is coming to you. But conversely, if you were to poke the person in the eyes, the person next to you, if you started poking them in the eyes, you're causing harm, and now harm is going to come to you. That's the cause and effect. You can see the natural law of Gotama very clearly in the world around you. So by understanding what is a living being, you can now make sure you're not causing harm to living beings. And the Buddha teaches you all throughout his teachings how to ensure you're not causing harm to living beings. And things like the Eightfold Path and the 5 precepts and things like this. He teaches you how to eliminate killing and stealing and sexual misconduct, lying, taking substances that cause heedlessness. He teaches you about right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, things like this. These are all teachings that someone would explore in a foundational class. But now, coming into a program like this, they start to learn about the 5 aggregates. And this is how you determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. What form is a physical form. Every living being is going to have physical form, right? So remember, you're not interested in believing these teachings of the Buddha. You can sit here and reflect, and you can see that this definition is actually true. It's held up for 2,500 years. Every single living being is going to have physical form, right? So human beings have physical form because we're living beings. Animals like snakes and squirrels and rabbits and birds, they have physical form. So every living being is going to have physical form. Living beings are going to have feelings. Feelings are like pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant, right? This is a living being is going to have feelings. A living being is going to have perceptions. What perceptions are is your views and opinions about the world. You're going to look out at the world in a certain way. And your views and opinions may or may not even be true. They may seem that they're true, but oftentimes they're false. They're misperceptions. So the mind in the unenlightened state will have perceptions, where it will have views and opinions about the world that may or may not even be true. Then there's what's called volitional formations. What these are choices and decisions. And a living being is going to have free will to make their own choices and decisions. And then there's a consciousness. A consciousness is the mind itself. So these are the 5 criteria, or the 5 aggregates that determine what is a living being. And you know you're a living being, so you can reflect on this to independently verify it. Do you have physical form? Yes. Do you have feelings? Yes. Do you have perceptions, views and opinions about the world? Yes. Do you make choices and decisions? Yes. You have free will. And do you have a consciousness or a mind? Yes, you do, right? And so does a squirrel, so does a rabbit, so does a bird, and all these other beings. So you can see that this is indeed helping you to be able to see what is a living being. But then you would like to take something that isn't a living being, that you know is not a living being, because you need to verify this teaching. You need to independently verify. You're not interested in believing anything that you see. So take something like this chair that I'm in, because we know this isn't a living being. Does it have form? Does it have physical form? Yeah, it has physical form, right? Does it have feelings? No, doesn't have feelings. Does it have perceptions? Does it have views and opinions about the world? No, doesn't have those, right? Does it have volitional formations or choices and decisions? Can it choose to pick itself up, walk down the street, and put itself back down? Doesn't have that, right? And does it have a consciousness or a mind? No, doesn't have that. Right? So we can see both sides of this, and we can independently verify this, that the Buddha indeed figured out through these natural laws how to identify what is a living being and what isn't a living being. And now this is really helpful for you, that as you go about the world, that you assure you don't cause harm to any living being, because that harm is going to come back to you. You can't run and hide from that. But what the Buddha is talking about here specifically is not only what is a living being and helping you to see what is a living being, but he's describing that beings are stuck. They're having desire, longing, excitement, and craving for each of these 5 aggregates. In other words, the mind is holding on to these things. So craving and clinging to the form is like when you look in the mirror and you see a pimple or a mole, or you see a wrinkle or a gray hair, and your mind is shaken up by that. That's you clinging to this physical form, wanting it to be permanent. And now when you look in the mirror and you see this impermanence of a pimple or a mole or your gray hair or your wrinkle, it's like, whoa, you don't like that, because your mind's craving this permanent youthfulness. The mind wants to appear to others in a certain way, and it's craving permanence. But you live in an impermanent world. Things are constantly changing, but your mind's going to crave permanence. So the Buddha is saying you're tightly stuck in the unenlightened state, craving this permanence of this physical body. Not only in the example that I just shared about appearance, but people crave permanent existence. They crave to exist in this world, thinking that this is permanent. And now when they get close to death, it's very painful for them, because they're holding on to this physical form and they don't want to leave. And now when they get close to death and they realize, like, oh my goodness, I can't stay here permanently, the mind is shaken up by this. So the Buddha is saying you're stuck, you're tightly stuck, you're holding on to this physical form, wanting it to be permanent, when in reality it is impermanent. Right? So you can train your mind to not cling to this body, craving for it to be permanent. Because if you're holding on and craving it to be permanent, you can't be peaceful and joyful there, because it's going to be constantly changing. But if you were all the way over here where you could care less what goes on with this body and you didn't take care of it, you're not going to be peaceful there either. So that's where the middle way comes in. You need to come to the middle where you make wise decisions about the food that you eat, about taking care of this body, getting medical checkups, maybe doing some exercise and things like that. Those are all wise things that you can come to the middle and just make wise decisions to maintain the health of this body as best you can, understanding that it's slowly deteriorating. That's what's going on with this body. That's what the aging process is that this body is slowly deteriorating because it's impermanent. So we can understand that, not clinging to it, wanting it to be permanent, but not being over here where we care less about what's happening to the body. You know, we wash our hair, we brush our teeth, we clean our nose, we go to the doctor, we do these things. You can do these from the middle way and be peaceful and joyful, knowing that you're taking care of it. But ultimately, this body is impermanent. It's going to fade away and decay someday, right? So then there's all these other things that the mind is clinging to too. Feelings, right? When you have anger, you have frustration or some other feeling in the mind, you might cling to this, particularly pleasant feelings. The mind will cling to those pleasant feelings. When you get so happy and excited, you'll cling to it and want it to be permanent. And then when it's gone, you'll experience painful feelings like sadness or frustration. But some people even cling to painful feelings. This is like holding a grudge. That's what we call it, right? Somebody does something, your mind perceives that this person has caused you to be angry. Now you will hold on to this anger, thinking you're getting back at them. Somehow you're getting back at them by holding on to this anger. But you're not actually harming the other person. You're actually harming your own mind, because now you're like holding on to a hot coal, trying to burn somebody else. And the only person getting burned is you. So when people have done things in the past that you disagree with, that anger that's coming up in your mind, it's actually being caused by your own mind. And now holding on to that anger and clinging to it isn't actually helping you at all. So that's what the Buddha is saying here, is that beings are stuck. They're tightly stuck in this holding on to their feelings, where you need to be able to understand that that's not serving you well at all. Holding on to these feelings is just shaking up the mind and causing you to make unwise decisions. Then there's certain perceptions that someone will have, views and opinions that the mind will cling to, right? So a very common one here that you can understand is like political views. right? Boy, do people cling to those, right? Their political opinions and views, people will cling to those. And now when they're in a conversation with someone, oh, it's like a fight to death that somebody's trying to argue that their political view is the best view, right? And now this is just leading to wholesome results for you, that you're making unwise decisions, clinging to these perceptions that you have about how the world should function. And now an individual is out there trying to convince other people that this is what is the way the world should be. But it's not only political views. That's not just what perceptions are. You can have other perceptions. This is where racism comes from. This is where sexism comes from. This is where people have all these kinds of things. They have certain views and opinions about people's ethnicity or their sexual orientation or their religion or some other thing, and they will cling to that perception that this type of person is bad and this type of person is good, and now I'm going to cling to this perception and I'm going to make decisions based on those perceptions, and now it's unwise. Right? So say, for example, you were an employer and you were clinging to the idea that someone with a certain color of skin or a certain gender or sexual orientation is not a intelligent person, is not someone who could do a good job. And now this person shows up in your office applying for a job, and right away, you clinging to your perception, you choose not to hire that person, where in reality, they could have been the very best person for the job. And now, because of your clinging to this perception, you've just made an unwise decision, and now it's going to affect you in an unwholesome way, right? Where what the Buddha teaches you to do is not to cling to your perceptions, that don't form views and opinions in your mind and then cling to that and hold on to that, because it's going to motivate unwise decision making, which is going to produce unwholesome results. Then there's choices and decisions. You can cling to these too. Like say you had this idea that you would like to go to Australia, and you make this plan 6 months in advance, and you're like, oh, I'm so excited, right? Because that's what the Buddha talks about here. Tightly stuck, longing and excitement. You're so excited to go to Australia. You just can't wait to go to Australia. Oh my goodness, this is going to be the best trip ever. I've been thinking about this trip for so many years, right? And you're planning it out 6 months in advance. And maybe you put down a deposit for the plane ticket or something like that. But now 3 months, 4 months, 5 months have gone by. It's getting closer and closer to the trip. And maybe you've experienced some impermanence. Maybe your cash flow is not so high. Maybe you've lost your job. Maybe you've been laid off, and now you don't have the money to go to Australia anymore. But if you cling to this decision to go to Australia and you're so excited to go, now you'll end up going into debt just to be able to go on that trip. Where the wise decision might have been, you know what? I'm just going to let this go. I'm going to delay this trip. I'm going to wait for a year or 2 or 3 when I'm able to get more money, and then I'll go on that trip another time. Going into debt for several $1,000s at this point in my life maybe isn't the best decision. I'm not going to do that. That would be potentially a wise decision. But if you're clinging to your choices and decisions, you won't do that. Your mind's clinging. It's trying to get that excitement. It wants those pleasant feelings. And it can only feel happy if you go to Australia. If you stay home by yourself and you don't go to Australia, your mind's not going to like that. Right? So the mind will tend to do things like go into debt in order to go to this trip to Australia, when in reality that might not be the best decision. So being stuck in clinging to your choices and decisions is going to motivate unskillful decisions, unwise decisions. And that's why the Buddha teaches you that it's unwise to cling to your choices and decisions. Because there's no harm in making a decision that's in the future, but you need to account for impermanence, that as things are changing along the way, you need to be willing to change your decision. There was a situation even for me several years ago. There were some students in the USA that asked me to come teach in the USA. They were interested in holding a retreat, and they were planning it 10 months in advance, and they were making all these plans, and they were putting it all together. And we were about 2.5 months before the retreat, and the plans didn't quite come together the way they were initially thinking. And they asked me, they said, what should we do? And I said, if I was you guys, I would actually cancel the retreat. right? No need to go forward. You guys aren't in a position to make this happen, right? Because there was a bunch of impermanence. One person had gotten pregnant and they were getting ready to deliver the baby because it was like 10 months of planning. They had gotten pregnant, and then it was like their baby was going to be delivered right at the beginning, right before the retreat. Another person had got injured at work and they weren't able to even work any longer, let alone host this retreat. So I suggested to them, you know what? It'd probably be best if you just cancel it. Don't even have the retreat. And then you can maintain your peace and your joy if you weren't clinging to it. But if you're clinging to this decision like, oh, our teacher is going to come to the USA, we're going to do a retreat, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Well, if you cling to that, then when you have to cancel it, or you're even thinking about canceling it, you'll experience painful feelings. But if you don't cling to it and you realize that all this impermanence that's happened, it looks like it's better to just not do it. And that's okay, because we can just change our decision. We don't need to hold on to it and cling to it. So there are certain decisions that you will make in your life that you're going to need to be willing to let go of and not continue to go forward with that, because you'll make a decision about something in the future, but then things are going to change. And now you need to update your decision. If you were to just implement that decision, even though there was all this change that happened, that would be unwise. In order to get to enlightenment, you need to make 100% wise decisions all parts of your life, and do that for an extended period of time, right? But you can't make a wise decision if there's been a bunch of impermanence and a bunch of change, and now you're standing at a situation where you made a decision 6 months ago, but with all that change, it's no longer a wise decision. 6 months ago, it was a wise decision, but now with all this change, it's no longer a wise decision. So don't just cling to your decision and implement it just because you made it 6 months ago. Realize there's been change. It's no longer a wise decision, and then just move on and let go. So if you're not clinging to your decisions and you're not getting all this excitement just because of this decision, you'll be completely comfortable in changing your decision. But you won't be comfortable to do that if you're clinging or you're tightly stuck, as the Buddha is saying. And then the same thing can happen with the consciousness. This is the mind itself, that the mind can be clinging to the mind itself. What this is like there's a certain self-identity in each individual mind in the unenlightened state, that you'll have the identity of I am Chinese, or I am American, or I am a police officer, or any of this I am around your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. Your mind can cling to any type of identity of who you think you are. And if you cling to that identity, when you're in a situation, say you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody says, all Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. Well, if you identify that way, you'll be like, wow, they're talking about me. And you get so excited about that because you're holding on and clinging to this identity, this consciousness. You're stuck in this view that I am American. But now 2 tables over, somebody's saying something degrading and disparaging about where you come from. They might say, all Americans are blah, 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 or all Chinese people are blah, 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 blah. And they talk really horribly about those particular people. Well, if your mind identifies with that is who you are as a person, now you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed in this situation. Where what the Buddha teaches you is that this doesn't define who you are. The same thing happens, like say you are a boyfriend or girlfriend and you identify with I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend. Well, when you guys are together, you feel somewhat comfortable. But when you guys break up, you'll feel uncomfortable because your mind doesn't identify with I am single. And now you might want to hurry up and get right back into another relationship, thinking that that's going to solve your problem. Where in reality, your mind's clinging to this identity that I'm a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend. You don't feel comfortable with I am single. Or say you were doing a job like a police officer or something like this. When you're doing that job, you'll feel great. But when you lose your job, maybe you get injured or you retire or you get fired, you'll feel like less of a person because your mind is identifying with I am a police officer, but now you're driving a taxi and your mind doesn't identify that way and you'll feel uncomfortable. You'll feel unwhole. You won't feel like a whole person because part of your identity is not intact any longer. So you need to get to the point where you don't cling to any of this stuff. You realize this body was born on a certain land that might be referred to as Spain or I don't think you were born in France, were you? You were born in France? Okay. Maybe you don't identify with I am French. I don't know. But, our mind can identify with any number of different things. But you need to get to the point where you understand that this body was born in China, or it was born in a place that's called America. But the mind doesn't have to adopt the identity of that's who you are, right? You can understand that you're doing this job or occupation of being a Buddhist teacher, but the mind doesn't have to adopt the identity that I am a Buddhist teacher, right? It can just understand, I'm performing this role, but it's not permanent, right? Even though I'm going to do it for the rest of this life, it's not permanent. At some point, I won't be sitting here teaching any longer. This being's going to die, right? You might be performing a job as a food server or a taxi driver or something like this, but that's not permanent. So you need to train your mind to understand that these things aren't permanent, and it's unwise to cling to it, because as soon as they start changing, and they will change, your mind will be angry or frustrated or sad or some other painful feeling. So the Buddha is teaching you not to cling to any of these things because they're not permanent. None of them are permanent. If you cling to it and want it to be permanent, as soon as it starts changing, that's where you'll have difficulties and struggles, because your mind's not getting what it wants anymore. That craving isn't being fulfilled. So now it's going to experience the painful feelings. So you can have wisdom to understand the truth, that none of these things are permanent, and it's unwise to cling to it. And now you can reside peaceful and joyful. But you need to train your mind to be able to do this. You can't just talk about it intellectually. You need to reflect on it and see that it's true. And then you need to practice and train your mind to let go. So Alejandro, that decision that you made to ask your student to make the video, right? Don't cling to that, right? Like, okay, this person said that they are going to make this video, but hey, you don't know whether that's actually going to happen or not, right? You don't know, because they could change their mind, and that's okay, right? They changed their mind, no big deal. Okay, we'll just see if somebody else will do it, right? But if we cling to it, we'll say, well, why are you changing your mind? That's not fair. You promised me to do this, and now you won't do it. And I really need this. I'm working with this marketer, and I need this video. Give it to me now, kind of thing. That's what the mind's going to be thinking. But if you don't cling to it, now your mind can be at ease. You'll be like, oh, you're not interested in doing it? You know what? Thank you so much for even considering it. I really appreciate that. And now you just move off to the next person and see if somebody else would be willing to do it. Okay? So this is the 5 aggregates. This is what's going to teach you how to determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being, so you don't cause harm to living beings. It's going to teach you to not cling to any of this stuff so that your mind can get to more peace and more joy. And the Buddha uses this great little analogy of little boys and girls playing with sandcastles, because if you've ever done that, where you created a sandcastle, you know that you're kind of protecting it, and then when the waves come in to destroy it, it's like, no, my sandcastle, right? But it's not until you scatter the sand that your mind is like, oh, okay, no worries, you've let it go at that point, right? But if you're trying to create this wonderful looking sandcastle and the water comes in and destroys it, it's like, oh no, your mind didn't know that it wasn't permanent, right? But if you're playing with your sandcastle and then you eventually like scatter it, if the water comes in, you don't care at that point. It's like no big deal, right? So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is scatter these 5 aggregates, where you don't allow your mind to cling to them, that you get to the point where, just like you scatter the sand castle, that you do the same thing, that you don't cling to any of these 5 aggregates. So you need to come to the middle where you can make wise decisions to care for this body, but you don't cling and crave, and you also aren't over here where you just could care less about what's happening. So all these 5 aggregates, you're going to need to be able to understand them and then apply it through your practice. So any questions on this chapter? Yeah, please. For those of you guys online, you can ask questions by putting this into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom.
Would, for example, hanging the national flag on your house, or in my case, well, wearing a sports t-shirt from your team, be clinging to self-identity?
It's not the action itself that determines whether or not you're clinging to it. It's what's going on in your mind. If you hung up that flag and it got ripped and torn, or somebody took it and stole it, how would you feel about that? If you'd be frustrated or irritated or angry, That's your mind clinging to the flag, maybe clinging to your identity. Or say if somebody drove by your house and yelled out, something derogatory about your nationality, how would you feel about that? Because it's what's going on in your mind. So it's not just the action of hanging the flag that determines whether there's a craving, desire, attachment in the mind. It's what's going on inside the mind. So you need to be able to see the longing, yearning. So if there's longing, yearning, there'll be discontentedness in those types of examples that I just gave. And if that's the case, you would be wise to not hang the flag, train your mind to let go of that identity and not allow your mind to cling to it. But then at some point, if you would like to hang the flag because that's what you prefer to have and it's beautiful and you like to have that flag, then hang the flag. But now your mind has already let go of any kind of identity, and you've seen that because your mind's been in certain situations where people have said negative or derogatory things about Spanish people, and you've been completely fine with that. So you need to test your mind enough before you do things like this. That would be wise, because if you just hang the flag, then your mind doesn't necessarily know, so it's always wise to kind of test the mind in these situations, or hang the flag and test it. You could do it that way too, right? There's not just one fixed way to do this, but you need to observe your mind with mindfulness to see, is it getting triggered regarding the nationality of Spain, since that's probably how your mind identifies, right?
I was thinking the Catalan flag.
Oh, okay. Yeah. More regional, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if your mind identifies that way, you'll have problems when someone starts talking negatively or about that or any other kind of derogatory thing related to that nationality or that ethnicity, right? Mm-hmm. So you would like to strip that away out of your mind, but at the same time, you can maintain your appreciation and your gratitude for this ethnicity and all the culture and all the customs. That's the thing, is like when we talk about stripping away the identity, sometimes people think they're turning their back on it, but that's not the case. You're just not allowing your mind to grab onto it as who you are as a person, but you can come to the middle where you appreciate the culture, you appreciate the elders, you appreciate the language and all these other things that you have as part of that culture, but you just don't allow your mind to identify with that as who you are as a person. And that's the middle way, right? Because if you were over here where you could care less and you were, not respectful to your culture and your customs and your ethnicity, then you probably wouldn't feel comfortable there either. So that's where there's the middle way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. You have a question? Yeah, we have microphones around.
Yes, so I wanted to ask, are there any good ways to train yourself to believe that nothing is permanent? Because believe and accept, because I think I am aware of the fact, but I'm still having trouble like digesting and accepting it that nothing is permanent. And currently I'm still thinking that it is kind of sad that nothing is permanent. Mm-hmm. For example, I had my 25th birthday several days ago, and I think like during that past year, I had a lot of new experiences, but I still feel like 1 year passed by real quickly. And when I think about it, I am worried and scared that what if like the other years will also pass by so quickly and then I will eventually die. And I mean, I am sure that I can still make a lot of things happen and make good memories during all those years, but I'm still stuck and confused by the fact that nothing is permanent. So I just wanted to ask like whether there are good ways to like persuade myself to accept that.
Sure. Yeah. So you're never interested in believing any of these teachings, because with belief, you don't know it's true or false. Right? You're just believing it because someone convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. You would like to see the truth and be able to know it with 100% certainty, because then you've got wisdom and you know more about the world around you. And now with that wisdom, you'll function differently. You'll make different decisions. So the way you get to the point of having the wisdom that the world is completely impermanent, everything around you, is you go around the world and try to find something that's permanent. Right? So you're walking down the street and you see a crack in the sidewalk. that's impermanence. You see it's sunny out right now, but later it's going to rain. You're like, that's impermanence. You see the green leaves in the trees and the brown leaves on the floor. That's impermanence. You see there was a certain number of students here in the class when we started, and now people have left. And now you can see, that's impermanence. Things are constantly changing. So you need to go around the world, and it may take you several days to do this, where you look around and you try to find something that's permanent, and you won't be able to find anything in the material world that is permanent. There are things like enlightenment itself. Once you get to enlightenment, that is permanent. It's called a unconditioned object, because what the Buddha said is conditioned objects are impermanent. He didn't say everything is impermanent. So what I usually say is everything in the world is impermanent, because that means like material objects are all impermanent. So anything that you can see, hear, smell, taste, anything that comes in contact with the body, or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind, these are all impermanent because they're conditioned objects. But then there's something called unconditioned objects. Enlightenment is that, and the natural laws that the Buddha taught during his lifetime, those natural laws are permanent as well. Now, people's memories of those and people's understanding of them in the books and things like that all changes, because those are material objects. Those are all going to change, but the natural laws themselves don't actually change. So you can go around the world and you can see that things are constantly changing, and that's how you're going to need to be able to see it in order to be able to show the mind. This is what the Buddha calls developing the perception of impermanence, where you understand and deeply soak into the mind that everything around you is constantly changing. One of the best things to be able to see that is this physical body. You've inhabited this body, you know it's constantly changing, right? You can see your relationships are constantly changing. People are coming in and out of your life all the time. You don't have the same exact people in your life all the way through your life. That's constantly changing your relationships. You can see your bank account is constantly changing, going up and down, but you can go around the world and you can investigate it further and see other things too. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you're not the only person I've ever heard from that it gets sad because of impermanence, right? Because that's the mind being stuck. The mind's stuck and it's holding on. It's wanting things to be permanent. And then when it realizes things are impermanent, the mind's not getting what it wants, which is things to be permanent. And now when it starts to realize this understanding that things are impermanent, that's where the discontent feelings come in. There's this sadness or frustration. But you can go beyond that. You can actually use impermanence to your advantage. There's certain situations where it's like, wow, thank goodness there's some impermanence here. It doesn't have to be impactful and detrimental. It can actually be a beneficial thing. There's many cases that I've seen where impermanence is actually helpful. Like say you book a hotel room, right? And you book like a standard room, but now you show up to the hotel and they upgrade you to the deluxe room or the luxury room for free. Wow, this is impermanence. This is really nice. I like this impermanence. This is outstanding. Wow. But then, sometime you show up to a hotel and you booked it and they're like, oh, we're sorry. We overbooked. We need to give you a refund and you can't stay here. Whoa. Now you're like, maybe you're upset with that if you were craving to stay at that hotel. But if you just understand that this is impermanence, okay, no worries. Yeah, please give me a refund. I'll just go find another hotel somewhere else. No big deal. But if you're craving and clinging to that hotel, now the mind will be frustrated. So you can use impermanence to your advantage. There's situations where it can actually be helpful. Mm-hmm.
I have a question about what you said about scattering feelings, perception, etc.
Mm-hmm.
With the example of the sandcastle. So I was wondering what could be the first steps to do the same, like building this castle and then scattering it myself, like in a daily life, like if I want to begin to practice to detach from those desires or those,
Yeah. The first step is learning the Eightfold Path. You need to learn that and practice it inside and out, backwards and forwards, because that's what's training the mind to let go. because the mind is a master in the unenlightened state of holding on and clinging. It'll cling to anything, even a bottle of water. The mind will cling to it, right? And now you don't have your bottle of water, and you're frustrated, agitated, like, where's my bottle of water? Oh my goodness, I lost it. Where is it at? Right? So the mind will cling to anything and everything that it can cling to. So you need to be able to train it to let go, let go, let go, let go. So the Eightfold Path is very important. And then doing things like, say somebody was attached to video games, which is a very common thing, right? The problem isn't the video game. You can pick up the video game and play with it. The problem is that the mind doesn't want to put it back down. So what you do is you train your mind in the Eightfold Path, but then you do things like pick up the video game, play it for 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and then you put it back down. And then you go away for an hour or 2 or 3, and then you come back over and you pick up the video game and you play it for a few minutes, and then you put it back down and you walk away. And you do this to train your mind to be able to pick it up and put it back down, pick it up and put it back down. So if there's certain things that your mind's clinging and craving and holding on to, you can do these kinds of things where you pick it up, do whatever you're going to do, and then you put it back down and train your mind to let it go. This is helpful for the mind. The action of doing this impacts the mind and trains the mind to be able to do this. So social media, right? That's a really big one that people might do that kind of thing with. That's really helpful, because the problem isn't the YouTube videos or the Instagram or the Facebook. That's not the problem. The problem is the mind doesn't want to put it down. And now if you train the mind to put it down, then you'll be able to learn how to pick it up for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, do what you need to do, and then put it back down. Instead of 3 hours, 6 hours searching social media and doing all these kinds of things. Because that's ultimately going to amount to unbeneficial things, because you're not able to address the other aspects of your life that you need to address.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you for providing this such amazing experience. I have a question about craving, because you said holding something tight or let it go. There was a middle way, but how to the middle way? Because is finding the middle way also a craving?
No, the middle way is where your mind's going to be peaceful and joyful. It's almost going to be like the mind takes a breath of fresh air. So let's take something simple. Let's just say you buy a new house, right? And now because you invested all this money, you go around like vacuuming all the time. You're attending to every last little detail of the house, not wanting there to be even just a little scratch on this house, right? Well, if you do this obsessively, you're going to drive yourself crazy, right? You're going to get stressed and have anxiety like crazy. But if you're all the way on the other side, where you could care less about what's happening to this house and you just let it deteriorate around you, you're not going to be peaceful and joyful there either. So you need to come to the middle where you can attend to it. You can clean it occasionally. You can do some maintenance on it occasionally, and you'll see that your mind's quite peaceful and quite joyful there, that you're not experiencing any stress or anxiety around this particular thing. So you can do things through wise decision making, where you're not craving and obsessed about it, but you're also not lackadaisical and could care less either. And you're going to need to do that with each individual thing in your life. Like you introduced me to your mom, even spending time with mom. You're going to spend time with mom sometimes, but sometimes you're not going to be able to spend time with her, right? And that's okay. At some point she's going to die, right? And you need to understand she's not permanent. She's not going to be in your life permanently. But if you hold on to her and you want her to be permanent, when she dies, it'll be very painful. But it's not your love that's causing that. It's the mind craving permanence. So you like to get to the point where you spend time with your mom and you enjoy that time, but then she's also off on her own, doing her own things too. And you can enjoy that as well. And sometimes she's going to be healthy and sometimes she's going to be sick. And that's impermanence, right? So you need to come to this middle where you understand this middle, where you're not holding on and craving mom, for example, to be permanently healthy, but you're also not over here where you could care less about mom. And you know what? If she doesn't have medicine, who cares, right? But you like to come to the middle where, hey, mom needs medicine. Mom needs to go to the hospital. Let's make sure that we get mom what she needs. And now you are in the middle and you feel at ease with that. And you don't feel guilty or shameful when mom gets sick, because you understand she's impermanent and that she's not going to be able to be permanently healthy. So there's this middle way where it doesn't need to be longing, yearning, and craving, but you're also not over here either, where you're could care less. You're just making wise decisions towards certain goals and objectives, whether it's maintaining your house or having a relationship or any number of things that you might be involved in. You'll be peaceful and joyful when the mind's in the middle. It's like the mind takes a breath of fresh air. It's like, that feels good. Mm-hmm. All right. So I don't see any other questions anywhere. Let me just check Facebook and YouTube. I don't see anything there. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just end class here by thanking all of you guys for joining. In our class at 9 p.m. that I teach at home, I do 10 chapters to make sure we get all 10 chapters. But in this class with a live audience, I just teach to whatever point we could get to. So we studied 2 chapters today, answered a lot of questions. So that's enough. That's the middle way, right? Whereas if I had this craving to cover 10 chapters, we'd be here until maybe 1 p.m., 2 p.m. today, right? And that would be not the middle way, right? So I just kind of usually teach for about an hour and a half or so on Saturdays like this and just go wherever we go. Sometimes we get 1 chapter, sometimes we get 2, sometimes we get 4 or 5. Each class is a little bit different. But if you guys would like to learn more, tomorrow at 9 a.m., I'm going to be teaching here in our group learning program. We're going to be in chapter 10 of this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. That's where I teach in a more traditional method, where I'm going to be teaching for 15, 20, 30 minutes, opening up for questions, teaching 15, 20, 30 minutes, opening up for questions. Chapter 10 is titled What is Merit? This is where you can learn about this wholesome Gama that you generate through practicing generosity. This is a helpful practice in order to make your way to enlightenment. So I'll explain to you guys what that is if you'd like to attend tomorrow. And then tomorrow evening at 6:30, we have a meditation in the main hall because they have a walking market. They have a shopping out here all over the city tomorrow, tomorrow, Sunday. And then at 6:30, we're going to be doing meditation in the main hall. So if you'd like to just come for meditation at 6:30, you're more than welcome to do that. And then after the meditation, I'm going to open up to any questions that students have, but mainly we're just going to be focused on meditation at 6:30. So you're welcome to come to that if you'd like. So whatever you choose to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. If you need something from me, if you need to get plugged into any of the books or audiobooks or videos or podcasts or any of the classes, let me know and I can help you. We have information on our bulletin board over there. We also have information on our website. So all of these places are good ways for you to plug into learning how to get to this enlightened mental state. And if you'd like help to do that, I'm here to help you. And all my help is available to you at no cost. I'm pleased to help all of you guys to experience this better way of life. So have a wonderful rest of your day and we'll see you next time. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.